Welcome back to another episode of Leaders and Founders. Today I'm thrilled to be joined by Kirsty Rutter, who is a leader of innovation within financial services, former Chief Innovation Officer at Barclays Bank, and now leading venture capital efforts at Lloyds Banking Group.
Lovely
Kirsty,
to be here.
welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
No, it's good to have you on. I guess today we go through a wide variety of stuff, but go through corporate venture, where the gaps in the market are for UK fintechs, the real opportunity of AI, and how we can foster a better ecosystem for founders in the UK.
Let's go.
Let's go. I guess, first of all, you've had an interesting journey throughout your career through innovation, transformation, big banks, working alongside startups. What drew you to financial services?
Speed and intellect was what really brought me to financial services. It was never product, it was always people. For me, it's always people. I'm drawn to places where I'm going to have fun. My value set is quite basic, right? I need to have fun. I need to do stuff that's new and I learn from. I mean, like do something that's going to have an impact. So that's what took me to financial services. And this is, my God, this is where I give away my age, right? So that was mid-late 90s. So at that point, capital markets in particular was where you went to experience huge amounts of change. That's when they were automating, like the exchanges were being automated. They were doing really cool stuff in tech, in trading, and just fascinating. So that's how I stayed in that space. So that was like late 90s into early 2000s. It was all about systems, data. So really I'm a data geek. And then what you could do with that and how you could create value for customers and also for the organization you're working for. So that's how I ended up in financial services. And
you mentioned about being able to do cool stuff with tech. There's, I guess, a story that it can be quite resistant within large financial services.
Yeah.
How have you found that?
It has been and always is true. If I go back, so I started off life as an accountant, right? And I'm not a great accountant. Well, that's not fair. I always wanted finance to mean more than just posting journals and presenting P&Ls and talking about costs. And in the early 2000s, that wasn't really the role of finance. It's changed now, but that wasn't the role of finance. So I was always getting into trouble because I wanted to add value and be a partner to the business. And I would kind of get, just go and do your day job. It's like, that doesn't feel like enough. So I decided I needed to move on from being a finance person. But even when I was a finance person, I was also the person who was looking at stuff going, that's not the smartest way to do this. And so I have very vivid memories of creating, I guess what you'd call now skunk works teams, where I would find willing partners in crime from different places across the organization, be that operations or tech or somewhere, and say, right, we could, we don't need to, this doesn't need to be basic things, it doesn't need to be a manual process. Just if you do that, and that, we can spit the report out the other end. So I am impatient and I hate waste. And my time is my only asset, right, in a workplace. So whatever I could do to innovate, I would pull people in and under the radar, get stuff done. So that was my earlier career. So it's kind of a theme. And I just took that through. So I went from finance to strategy roles. And then I ended up in risk, regulation, and then more into tech and data. But always the theme is, this isn't as effective or as smart as it could be. How do we do it better?
Nice. Guerrilla transformation.
I'm not sure I'd call it guerrilla. I'd love it to be guerrilla. Sometimes it has to be a bit more subterranean than guerrilla, because if you create too much noise without mandate. So when I was little, right, as in junior, if I created too much noise, someone would shut it down. So I wouldn't create much noise and just do it. And then go, oh, look what we've managed to do. Now I have the benefit of being more senior. I can be a bit noisier, but it's still hard.
What do you think the biggest concerns are from other people when it comes to that sort of change and transformation having to fly under the radar?
So when I'm solving a problem, I've got huge amounts of pockets of data and information that are not linear. They are stored all over my head in very abstract ways, but it works, right? But if I'm talking to a CFO typically, who wants a very linear step through this approach, most of my leadership, well, I guess those I've reported into, don't have the same mind as me. And so I have had to find a way of communicating why this massive network of information that I've got means that this is the thing we need to do, except that requires me to back engineer how all of the weird stuff that's in my head comes together.
The classic show you're working.
Yeah, and I can't always, right? So what I used to get, give me an old appraisal and they'll all say the same thing. My appraisals used to say, take people on the journey with you. And I'm okay, I don't always know what the journey is. I can just tell you what we need to do, right? And so I learned that I had to keep my mouth shut before I'd realised what the answer is, and then work out how I reverse engineer it into a very linear PowerPoint, basically. Otherwise, people didn't understand where I was going.
And then take them on the journey,
Yeah.
once you figured out the end point.
Correct. I have to go backwards. And so rather than trying to explain that to people, I just decided that I would just quietly work backwards and then make it look like I hadn't known that that was the outcome, even though I've known the outcome for ages. So that's still true today. Same thing.
I think it's good though, because if everybody thinks in the same way, has the same approach, you're going to have the same results for years on end. You need that somebody to challenge the status quo.
Yeah, but it's really hard work when you're on your own, right? You have to find allies. And what I've learned in financial services is most people are fairly linear. You find the odd one or two people whose brain, so the team I've built now at Lloyds, we've realised actually we all think different, which is why we have so much fun and why as a small team we've achieved so much. I've built teams who are very diverse, as we've learned, actually neurodiverse. We can get to a solution and a way of working really quickly. It's very creative amongst the few of us. And then you, to your question at the beginning, then you walk into how are we going to fit that into a linear governance model? This is going to be hard. So then that's the problem, right?
Yeah.
You've got an outcome and you're going to try and reverse it into the system.
How do you find those people that have similar mindsets, or you can tell that they
How do I find them?
Well, how do you identify them? Because I guess in an organisation where you are all trying to fly under the radar and not show that that is perhaps how you work.
That's a great question. I don't know if I know the answer. We tend to seek each other out. I don't know. It's a bit of maybe it's a bit of, I am quite open with how I communicate, and I guess that maybe resonates with people who might think a bit differently too. There is no formula for that one other than you kind of put the signal out and you see what signal you get back.
Nice. Talk to us a bit about the role you mentioned about the team you built at Lloyds.
Yeah.
Tell us what it is you do.
Yeah. So we invest minority equity into fairly early stage fintech, so seed to Series B. Typically, we'll write an investment check for about between 2 and 15 million pounds. The objective is that we are accelerating Lloyd's strategy, and we're also supporting the company we're investing in, right? So the original pitch, if I go back to that, was I have always, well, certainly since the last 2 decades, kept an eye on what's going on outside and have a strategic view of what the organisation is trying to achieve. The other thing I know is that every organisation I've worked at, and there's been a few, culturally is completely different. And so even though it might look like it's a bank, it doesn't operate in the same way as the one, next one up on the high street type thing. And so where I could see, and I want to add value, right? So we go, I want to have fun, I want to add value, I want to learn. I have the most fun by driving impact and doing it with people I have fun with and deeply care about. And so I proposed to the CFO and the CEO that there was a gap for Lloyds in what we refer to internally as bringing the outside in. And we could support that and be more deliberate if we took strategic investment in companies that we thought would support our business strategy, right? Support the outcomes we want for clients and customers. And so I pitched it. Oh gosh, this is like Christmas 2021. Yeah, Christmas 21. And New Year 22, I get a call saying, yeah, go do it. see where you get to. And I went, oh God. So I had a PowerPoint. So in that sense, we are a startup in a very established bank. So yeah, Valentine's Day 22 was my first day in seat officially in this role. And I spent, 3-4 months working out who I needed to hire, bringing the team in, and then we did our first deal November 22. Because equally, right, you need to be seen to actually deliver.
Yeah.
So what I have learned is that innovation and change and ideas are fab, but unless you actually get executing, it counts for not very much. So I got the team in May, September, we did our first deal, October, November, and then since then we've invested 50 million in 10 companies. I've also managed a slightly broader portfolio of stuff that was invested before I existed that we found across the organisation. And so now I manage that whole portfolio and I have an awesome team that are out either looking for solutions or working with the business to see what problems they're trying to solve.
It's an interesting intersection because VC's hard,
Yeah.
but you're adding another layer of complexity of it's not just it has to be a good deal, but also it has to
That's right.
be beneficial for both the bank and the business.
Yeah.
How do you manage the two?
So I've had feedback from the McKinseys of the world to tell me that the model I'm running on corporate venture, because you're right, it's not traditional corporate venture, is what they would consider the best. I thought,
it's good feedback.
Thank you. I shall bank that. Yeah, but and you're right. It's a great observation. Thank you. That the value comes. So I run a dual scorecard, and that's deliberate. My scorecard has basically 2 columns on it, 2 items on it. One is, was this a great investment? So is the business building? Is it creating value? How are we tracking? Just like any VC would. But the other one that I think actually the leadership, so CFO, CEO, put far more value on is what value is it created for the business and for customers and clients. And I don't know if I would have known how to do that if I hadn't spent the previous decades in other jobs, right? In finance, in strategy, in operations, in tech, in data, in the business. Because I know how both sides work. And so I spend as much time on my team. So I built a whole new arm of my team last year, which is looking at tracking commercial delivery, unblocking stuff that's getting in the way. Because I guess I gave myself that. I gave myself and I was given that mandate, which is if we're going to make this investment, first off, I need the business case. That means it makes sense. And second off, I'm going to keep an eye on that the business who committed to this business case is actually creating the value. And then kind of the follow through for that is that not only are we seeing the value for customers and clients in product and services, but we're also seeing the value to the fintech because they are growing and that's amplifying their impact. And so their value, so it kind of, they self-fulfill each other, right? If commercially Lloyds shows up and creates that value, then the fintech that we've invested in is more valuable.
Obviously, there's the 2 sides, 2 scorecards you mentioned.
Yeah.
If there was one thing you had to pick that you look for in either the founder or the company, what would it be?
It's always the founder, always.
Is there anything specific about a founder?
There's a drive, but there's not an arrogance. There's a self-belief, but there's not a, I know everything you don't know. So it's the flavour of that. So there's a humbleness, but there's a fire. That's probably the easier way of describing it, but it's always about the founder. It's that you know that whenever you make an investment, that business and that product is going to pivot, I don't know, a dozen times. The thing that you invest in, especially if you go in super early, the thing that you're going to invest in is not necessarily, and most likely isn't going to be, where you're at 2 to 3 years later. And so you're looking for someone who is focused enough to want to get stuff done because speed is important, execution is vital, but also acknowledges that what they think makes sense now might not make sense in 2-3 years' time. And so they've got to be able to accept that and adapt. And so it's really that you're seeking out, and that you get from being in it and just seeing the successes and seeing the things that, and building a kind of, if you like, a logbook or a checklist of the traits that you're looking for. And sometimes you just know. It's like, I guess it's like dating, right?
Yeah.
You go into a bar, you chat to people, and you're like, not my cup of tea. A version of that, but from a founder's perspective.
In terms of fintechs, obviously, there's loads.
Yeah. Well, everything's a fintech.
Everything
now,
seems to be a fintech now,
Yeah.
whether it's across payments, infrastructure, whatever it
As
might
soon as
be.
you put payments or insurance in a product, it's a fintech.
It's a fintech. But what's missing? What's not being built that you think should be?
If I put my bank hat on, the thing that is always an afterthought is the risk management and the control. So RegTech kind of dealt with some of that, but that was much more around regulation and how you're going to manage regulation and what's coming in. With the emergence of AI, I mean, everyone will be talking about it. The real challenge we've got societally and as a technology is how we're going to control it, how we know what it's doing, how it's explainable. And so I think the real winners are going to be either the tools that are written with that in, or service that need. And that's kind of if I go back to the risk and regulation roles I've had, right? That's the stuff that doesn't look very sexy, but honestly, if you haven't got it, it's going to cause you so much trouble and angst, because now you can't go back and code it in, because the train has metaphorically already left the station, right? You've got to build it so it's controlled from the beginning. And I think that has been missing for the last decade, in my view, in pretty much everything that's being built, because it would be much more sustainable and cost way less if people had designed it in at the beginning. But unless you've been in that role and you understand what the outputs have got to be to satisfy that, it's tough. It's tough. So that is what I still believe is where you might not see it now, but in a couple of years' time, that will be what stops all the really bad stuff happening.
And I was going to ask what the most underhyped part of fintech is, but would you say it's the same around risk and regulations?
Underhyped, maybe, because it's just not sexy.
It's not.
It's not at all. It's the picks and shovels, right, that make something work.
And do you think it's potentially its downfall is that it's unsexy? So from an outside looking in, for investors or consumers, it's just not that interesting, or people building. They want to be at the forefront building a neobank or a new payments company.
Payments might be slightly different, because payments is rife with regulation, right? And so you can't, without having built it, without having controlled it, or at least acknowledged it, you don't get very far very quickly, because payments, I mean, it's such a huge industry now that it's well enough understood. But I think, to answer your question, I think the problem and the gap is that people who genuinely understand how this stuff needs to operate, like if you go to the output backwards, they're all not necessarily very entrepreneurial or tech savvy. So they understand what they need to understand to say that something is safe, but they aren't necessarily able to convert that into, okay, so what needs to be built? So I think the general challenge for most large organizations, probably in any industry, is having product or functional knowledge, but not having spent the time to understand how technically or from a data perspective that comes together. You need that. You have to, in my view, success in the next 5+ years is people who have deep technical capability, and technical from a, how does this product work, or how do I prove I'm in control, or how do I know my numbers make sense? But that in the context of where did it come from, what was your source data, which systems has it flowed through, therefore how does it all fit together? It's very rare to find people who have that depth of curiosity that want to understand how we got in the first place. That for me is the big unlock. So when you find the people who know how something runs end to end, from inception through to output, you need to like put your arms around them and hold on to them really, really tightly.
For the team you've built, you mentioned it was easier to take people who understood Lloyds
Yep.
and teach them investing. In this scenario, do you think it's easier to take the people with the tech and entrepreneurial understanding, or the people who actually understand the process?
You very rarely find someone who can do all of it. So it's more a case of those that can meet in the middle.
Okay.
So can you get a technical person that wants to come close enough to business? Can you get a business person that wants to get close enough to tech? And then can they communicate in the middle? It's very rare, especially with the speed of things in technology, particularly that are changing so fast. You can't be, my view anyway, you can't be an expert on both ends, but you do need to know how to meet in the middle.
Yeah. It's building the perfect team, I guess.
Yeah. It's all about diversity, but then being able to throw it on the table and go, well, I don't know how that bit works, teach me.
In terms of founders and the UK, personally, I'm fed up of seeing posts on LinkedIn continuously about the UK is terrible, we're not fostering innovation. And there might be an element of truth to that. But on a more positive spin, what can we do to improve innovation and the ecosystem for founders in the UK?
So there's a few lenses. One is geographically. There is some incredible talent outside of London, but it's very hard to, the connectivity and the visibility of where they are and who they are is not that easy to find. You have to go hunting for it. So there are networks, regional networks that just know huge amounts of who's doing what they're great at, but you have to be plumbed into them, right, to find them. I think it's a fairly intransparent cohort, both from an investor perspective and then from a solutions perspective. So trying to find, if you know you have a problem that you want to solve and you're thinking, God, who could I do this with? It's incredibly difficult unless you know someone who knows someone who knows somebody to find that person. So the visibility of who's doing what they're working on, and there have been attempts to do bits of this, but I don't think it's particularly accessible. So that unlock would be massive. Financing outside of London is growing, but and I speak to people regularly who are doing stuff in Manchester and up in Leeds, and Scotland has an awesome ecosystem. But again, you need to know where you're going, and it's pretty lonely. If you're a proven exited founder, you have a network, right? But if you are thinking, God, I could really do this. I remember, slight digression, I started my own business outside of banking and had to, this was, God, I don't know, like 10 years ago. And I had been cocooned in corporate world, right? So I decided, right, you know what, I'm going to do this because I think there's an opportunity here. I was doing product development and sales for software companies, as in software companies that had great IP but didn't know how to position it as a product you could sell into financial services. And I'm a translator, right? So I understand tech. I love nothing more than you putting me in front of a tech person and them explaining the design principle of what their technology can do, and then me going, well, hang on, that's a problem over here in banking. If you positioned it like this and got hold of this kind of data, you could really sell it. The challenge is you don't know, and I had personal experience of this, is I had to learn all of that from scratch. I had to work it out for myself, right? I had to find a network that I could sell into, and it was exhausting and thrilling all at the same time. But I had no idea where to start. Now, it's better now, because like 10 years on, there's a lot more locations, resources, folk who you can kind of tap up. But I have to ask myself the question, do I know that because I know that? And if I was starting again, would I know where to start? And I don't think it'd be easy. So I think that for me, it's about transparency and openness, and how do you source the information that you need? Who do you go to?
What would you do differently if you went back and did that again?
If I went back and started my own business
Yeah,
again?
if you started the same thing now, obviously from what you've learned, what would you?
Oh God, I've never thought about that.
oh, sorry, this is going to be I would do this.
What would I do differently again? Well, my business died because of Brexit, so I would undo Brexit, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Some easy things, sort of.
Yeah. What would I do differently again? I would have been more, less thinking about it by myself and more out bouncing it off people as how do I develop this faster? Because the other behaviour that I find really interesting, and it still exists in large corporate land, is, and I found it really hard to let go of, is I'd spent years in corporate land being very protective of what I knew and who I shared it with, because people would steal it off you, right, and sell it as their idea. Still happens. Still drives me crazy. Fintech land isn't wired like that. People tend to, majority of people I ever met, want to help you. So they'll introduce you to people, but for them to introduce you to the right people, you have to expose and be honest about what you're doing so that they can then kind of spar with you and they'll want to develop it with you. The first few weeks of trying to immerse myself in a community of people who wanted to help me blew my mind, because I'd been hardwired to be really cautious about who knew what, because someone was going to stamp it out or someone would nick it. I didn't trust people very quickly. Unfortunately, that is a legacy of organisational design, right? So I had to unlearn that. So I would have, if I knew then what I know now, I would have gone more aggressively and faster into sparring with other entrepreneurs and other founders to better my product and get to market faster.
Okay. I think that's an interesting thing you mentioned there, that probably big corporate could learn from startup.
Yeah.
Is having that environment where it's tough to police, right? But you can share ideas without fear of somebody ruining it or stealing it from you.
Yep.
Flipping that around, what could the startup world learn from big corporate that potentially they're missing at the moment?
There's two things. One of them I would like them to learn, one of them I would like them not to learn but have to understand. Speed, but that's a two-sided coin, right? Engaging with a large organisation is never fast, albeit the large organisation would like to think it's fast. It's not.
It's not.
So when I worked by myself, 24 hours and not hearing anything was that was just awful. Now, not hearing something for 2 weeks is normal. So 24 hours in fintech land is 2 to 4 weeks in corporate land equivalent, right? And so I think that time warp is important for people to appreciate, but on both sides. So when a fintech engages with you and says, what do you think of this? And you wait a month to reply, that's really not helpful, because they will have probably released, I don't know, there've probably been 2 releases since you, if not more, since they asked you that question. And so now the question's kind of obsolete because the product development's moved on so much, right? And so there's a sense of urgency in fintech that there isn't in organisations, but organisations want that sense of urgency. It's kind of two sides, sometimes a little bittersweet, because you want to learn, but at the same time, the systems make you slow. The other thing, and I have to speak from FS for this point, is the best idea in the world from a small organisation has to be realistic about the machine it's going to get itself involved in. And there are lots of, some self-created, but there are rules and regulations that you can service the rule and regulation maybe differently, but you can't sidestep it. And that's not easy to appreciate, right? Because you're like, but this is the best thing ever.
Yeah.
I should be doing this. Oh, you should be doing this. And look how much value it would create. Difficult, but also part of the conversation we have with our investment companies, which is, this isn't going to be fast. Are you sure you want us?
And do you think that for those companies, obviously it's good to have that transparency and honesty about the length. Do you think they're best suited to solely selling into FS, or those ones like you mentioned earlier where you see a business that's building great product but it could have value in FS, so they've got different speed of sales cycles?
Yeah.
So they're not solely relying on FS time.
Yeah. It's always a conversation we have with companies who are looking to us to invest in them, because I maintain a level of transparency and honesty with all of our investment companies. The fact that you can spend 12 months chatting and not creating revenue from a relationship is lovely and flattering, and people will want a big brand on their page, right, of who we're working with. But there has to be a dose of reality that you have a certain amount of runway and you need to print some money. So where's the balance? Either that, or you raise so much money that you can afford to wait 12, 18 months, right? But that's
It's hard to do.
That's a really hard thing to do. And so what me and the team always try and do is make sure people are coming into this with eyes open, no rose-tinted glasses, because yes, the brand logo is great from a credibility and when fulfilled from an access and a value creation point of view, but it's also hard work and takes time. And so can you get, to your question, can you get quicker wins elsewhere and find a balance between like short, medium and longer term plan?
Okay. We've touched on it briefly, but AI, it's probably
Everywhere.
outside of fintech, it's the only other thing that every company's an AI tech company now.
Yeah. Well,
in some way.
And every organization is working on being an AI company, right?
Whether they are anywhere near it or not is a different
It's like it's
topic.
like having strategy in your title, Jack. It choose how you want to define it.
Where do you see the real value for AI within, I guess, fintechs and large banks as well?
My forward view is the real unlock comes when AI is the core pillar of how you've designed the organization. So it's very hard to unlock the true power of AI, my personal view, right? True power of AI when you layer it on top of what already exists. It's a little bit like my risk and control comment earlier. If you've built something and then retrospectively you need to look at how you're going to control it, you've got lots of people walking around, I use this analogy regularly, walking around with clipboards, right? Ticking boxes and saying, yes, that's fine, retrospectively. But actually, you wouldn't have needed any of those people if you'd have designed controls in at the beginning. AI is the same. If you've got, again, my view, if you've got an organizational model that is still designed for a linear process, what you're going to get by putting AI on top of it is some efficiency. If you look at how AI, and I guess this goes back a little bit to how my brain, the shape of how my brain is wired, AI allows you to access data from multiple sources. The design premise has to be, what outcome do you want? Not what process do you currently run? And that shift is really important. And that's true of any organization that's trying to do something with AI. I park for a moment the ones that are a pure AI company, rather the ones that are trying to solve something and create value. You've got to understand what outcome you're after, what data you need, and therefore how you put kind of the AI operating model in between it, rather than go, well, I used to do, it's kind of in a manufacturing context, I used to go from raw material to widget A to widget B to widget C to finished product. I might not need to do it that way anymore. I could probably pull them all together in a different way and 3D print it. I'll get the same outcome, but my process will not have been linear. It will have been completely designed completely differently. So that is the key step change, is that organizationally, it's not about process now, it's about outcome. It should have always been about outcome, but it's always been about process.
I guess some of the problem with that, though, is the easy thing to do is just tag AI onto something and make it slightly more efficient.
Yeah.
So it's easy to get quick wins, show, oh, we use an AI, this is the improvements we've made, aren't we great?
Yeah.
But it's not easy to start from scratch and build AI in from the beginning to your core offering.
No, it's the same. You could probably compare it, and maybe people might argue that this is an oversimplification, but when you move from legacy tech to cloud, you're going from linear architecture to networked architecture. Same as process. Process has gone from linear to networked, or really what you're looking at is data flows. But you've got to be able to be clear on outcome. If the outcome's not clear, you're just going to get a hodgepodge of stuff.
Do you think it's a waste of time doing these quick wins? Should they be focusing
No,
on
I think you need
the
to
core
save
build?
some money.
Yeah.
So the efficiency is really helpful, right? If you can unlock value and cost and deploy it elsewhere, brilliant. But to your point, I don't think you're going to get rid of the fact that you need to shift the thinking to outcome design led.
And are there any, obviously building it into that core offering, but is there anything specific that you see this is a huge opportunity within AI at the moment that isn't out there?
It was interesting. I was reading an article yesterday. So the short answer is I'm not sure, but there are the value creation is coming from potential value creation comes from what you can't do with AI. And that the article I was reading was a mixture of deeply functionally technical stuff, kind of back to the regulation reg tech version of, and then also the stuff that just requires that hasn't been worked out yet. Therefore, there is no history upon which you can develop AI, right? Because unless you've got the data for it to learn from, it can't work out the problem. And we're getting to the point where you give it enough information and the system enough information and it can come up with proposals maybe you hadn't even thought of. But in general, if the learning data is not there, then you can't necessarily yet properly solve for it with AI. So I think there's a few things. There's I would like to understand how the organisational model of large organisations like mine and those I've worked at fundamentally changes if you put AI at the core of it. I don't think, I may not be party to these conversations, but I don't think that's so far from how places have built themselves over the last 20, 50, 100, 200 years, that it's such a sea change in model. I'm not sure people have got their heads around it. So where we are at the moment, I think we end up with some incredible innovations that are happening outside of the large corporates, and the corporations getting their head around how you apply it, but from an efficiencies perspective. And I don't think they've met well enough yet. So I'm not sure I'm really answering your question. I haven't got a crystal ball, so I'm finding it really hard to keep up myself because it's like every week things are changing. And there was a stat I had a couple of weeks ago, and it was that the number one position on the most innovative AI solution used to be number one for 3 days. Now it's less than a day. So if that's the pace at which the AI world, like AI for AI world, is moving, and I'm a few steps removed from it, I don't think I have the answer.
It's fair. How hard does that make it for startups if the scale of change and pace is that quick?
So quickly. Like when the AI agents boom happened, 12, 18 months ago now, there were huge amounts of awesome founders that suddenly found that their solution was walking very quickly towards obsolete. And now you've got so many tools that are arriving on a daily basis that you've got this this challenge where you want to build your business, and at the same time you've got to keep an eye on like how the world is shifting at such a pace that you need to be able to be very clear as to how you're going to create value. And therefore getting to, in my mind, what's happened is go-to-market value creation has just shrunk. You've got even less time to show how awesome you are, and even less time to create value, because in 12, 18 months, something's going to come in that kiboshes you. That's hard.
It's hard to look good now.
It's really hard.
If you've got Lovable doing 100 million ARR in 8 months.
Exactly right.
That's the new standard of what good is.
Yeah, and
so you doing 5 million in 2 years is now not that impressive.
Yeah, but it might be good enough for you,
yeah.
right? But it's not a headline like it would have been 2-3 years ago, which is hard. Lovable is an incredible example. Now, I mean, I don't know about you, but every other article you read is like, well, when's the one-person unicorn happening, right? I'll just get my field of agents, I'll tell them what I need, and they're going to create it for me. Now,
Do you think that's possible?
Well, this is back to the conversation we had earlier, right? Which is, unless you're someone who genuinely knows how the whole thing fits together from start to finish, so route to outcome, how do you know that you've designed it well enough? Because you are seeding a lot of assumptions to the system.
You're putting a lot of trust in AI.
Huge amounts of trust that innocently you will assume is well controlled, auditable, reliable, explainable. So that I don't doubt that there will be examples where huge value is created by a one-person business. The question in my mind is how is that person who builds that business going to make sure that they have ticked all the peripheral boxes of, yes, the functions might not exist in a kind of linear process, but have you thought about all the componentry? Like, where are you getting that insight and information and expertise from? Do you now buy it in? Is that, yes, an agent can help you, but how do you know that the agent has got everything? So that for me is always the riddle, right? I spend a lot of time chatting with Claude. Claude is my favourite. My kids take the mick out of me now. Go, Mum, did you come up with this high protein diet? And both my sons are big sports people. I said, of course I didn't. I asked Claude to put me together something that takes 10 minutes to prepare that you two are going to eat.
Therefore, I came up with it.
Yes. So yes, but no, right? But and then you have the old adage, which is, I don't know what I'm being told is correct or incorrect unless I know the answer.
Yeah, it's fantastic. When you don't know the answer, it seems incredible. But when you do have subject expertise, you start to question it and go,
because you can interrogate and go, sorry, have you not forgotten that bit? Oh, yes, I have. Let me just add that in. Okay.
Which I guess proves the point you were just saying, unless you know the whole process from beginning to end, if you've got gaps in there, you could easily miss something.
Correct. And that's the danger, which is why I go back to, it's the whole risk control bit, which is the unsexy unlock in my mind.
And is there a particular set of skills that have changed for what a founder needs to be successful now?
Product as much as technical. I don't think you can be a purely technical founder anymore, because you've got to be able to sell it into people who are buying it, who are typically not technical. That I also think you need to have, what's interesting is, because you've now got the challenge that we just discussed, I think you need a much more senior expert team around you than, I sound like my mum, the olden days when 5-10 years ago you could just have a go and work it out as you went. I don't think you have the time to test and learn in the same way that you did a few years ago, because you've got speed to market and you need to deliver. And so your design has to be pretty robust from the get-go to be credible and to get to market to create value.
I think that's true. And the old startup way of, it's chaos, we'll just figure it out as we go along. It didn't last very long in reality, because it's not been that long since that worked. How do you think that changes the working environment for people coming into it? Is it going to be harder for less experienced people to get into early stage startups?
Yeah, I have had that conversation for the last couple of years. From a societal perspective, I think it's going to be really challenging. If I look at how I learned my pathway, or I developed my understanding and experience, it was from working from the bottom, right? But working from the bottom now is going to be automated. So how do you, and I have the same thought, my kids going into the workplace, like, okay, I have no idea what job, what you want to do, but also how you're going to get the experience to then become the expert. So how do we, and we're avoiding this question, I think, as a society, as a kind of global community, to be honest, is go back to my Claude conversation. If I can ask Claude anything, how do I know? I think we all have to become philosophers, because we need to know what question we're asking. How do I know that the question I'm asking is the question I need to ask if I don't know what the answer is? That is a whole, it's like ancient Greek.
It's almost the complete
philosophy.
opposite of education and schooling system now. You're taught to learn answers to questions you're going to be asked.
Not taught to question.
How do we change that?
Yeah.
Because now it's
Which is
complete
why-
opposite. You don't know the answer. It is philosophy, essentially.
Yeah, it is. It's all philosophy. And I think we are almost back to ancient Greece. And I don't think we have tackled that. And it's a risk. So now I notice, is it ChatGPT now has got like a student approach, which rather than giving you the answer, steps you through how it got to the solution. Okay, that's great. But if you're not of that learning style, how are you going to know? Because we're all different, right? I know how you learn, but I learn by actually doing something.
Same.
If you just tell me how something works in one ear, out the other, if I have a problem that requires me to really dissect something and then come up with solutions and then check back as to whether they're feasible, I'll understand it and then I can bank the information. But there's a big risk that everyone just becomes a passenger, right? A passive user of stuff that gets churned out because they asked a question. But who's challenging that the question was the right question in the first place? So I think it goes back to your point. We have to root this back in education. I don't know how. I came in on a finance grad program. I learned to be an accountant. What does that program become in the future? Like, how do I know that how does all that stuff that I learned become useful, applicable, value-adding as it did 20 years ago, right? She said it's nearly 30. Because then I think my role then was easy. I knew like how I was going to go up the ladder. I don't think that's obvious anymore. I think that's hard, and I don't think we've answered it.
In your opinion, obviously, it is all going to change. It's changing as we speak.
Yeah.
How far away do you think we actually are from that world where AI is trusted to do a lot more? And not saying everything, but I have conflicting thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I think on the stuff that I understand, I'll have a degree of comfort. I guess, but I was brought up to be a cynic, right? To trust nothing unless I understand it and I can unpick it. There's going to be a whole heap of stuff that surrounds me that I can't unpick. I don't know what I do with that. So you go back, you go back a few years where we started to understand how we were all manipulated through social media and the kind of the drip feed of the narrative that you're given. It's happening all the time to the point where I've now switched off channels because I'm just like, I'm exposed to this stuff enough. I understand it not enough. I have an inkling as to the effect it's having on me and I'm just going to shut it down. But there's a whole cohort of society who take it all in.
A-level results that were released recently, even that, it was talking about boys beat girls in A-levels for the first time in 3 years. It's like, is that the best way to break news about A-level headlines?
Right? Like, let's just pit everybody against everybody else. Like, it's not necessary. Can we just be a bit more cohesive in our behaviours and our society? It's not creating a great environment and it drives me a bit potty. So I turn the feeds off.
Maybe that's a startup opportunity, a positive news company.
You know what I have thought about. So it's like, if you just want to know, like, joy.
Yeah.
A moment of joy.
And not just like fluffy joy, but just positivity.
Yeah. Do something like, find out who's doing great stuff. Maybe that's my retirement plan.
There you go. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'd like to end with some quickfire questions. So just first thing that comes to mind. A book that's influenced your way of thinking.
I read lots of books. The book I'm reading at the minute is The Coming Wave, Mustafa Suleyman, who is the founder of DeepMind. That is mind-blowing because I think he wrote it a few years ago, and it's AI, bioengineering, and compute, quantum particularly, all coming together. And I look at it and go, well, I know about kind of the AI side. Oddly, many years after my degree, I kind of understand the quantum side. I had no idea as to what was going on in the kind of biotechnology space. And it's opened my eyes and at the same time scared the bejesus out of me. That's an awesome book.
It's probably an area as well, you mentioned there about the biotech side, it kind of flying under the radar because of AI.
Yep.
Whereas a few years ago, it was a bit more popular in the headlines. It was the next cool thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of
and there's a
creeping.
lot of it. Well, this is it. There's a whole chapter. My elder son loves biology, and I was like, you need to read this chapter because you won't be learning this at school. Like, this is what's actually happening now. In fact, this is what was happening 2 years ago. So goodness knows where it's got to now.
Awesome. What is an undervalued skill in leadership?
Listening and letting people screw up.
Learn from your own mistakes.
Yep.
A founder or company that you rate very highly at the moment? I know it's unfair to make you pick one, but...
I'm going to go for Robin Tomes, who leads Yoti, who's one of our investment companies and has just done an amazing job with the team on responding to all the regulation that's coming in on verification of age and all of that stuff. He's a patient, smart man.
I remember first coming across them, probably COVID time. I think that's when I really saw them start to take off.
Yep.
What I've really liked is how they've managed to evolve the business and not just be a company that only succeeded because of COVID is probably not a great way of putting it, but only saw a market opportunity then. They've really managed to evolve nicely.
They are expert at what they do. Like if I have questions on what's going on in the industry, I will call Robin.
Awesome. And then finally, if you were to be able to speak to yourself going into the world of innovation and transformation in banking, what's one piece of advice you would give yourself?
I'd go earlier and say, take more risk.
Awesome. Well, good way to end. Well, thank you very much, Kirsty. I've really enjoyed it.
Me too.